America survived wars, recessions, and disco, but somehow feared ceiling fans and candy. Stay with this story, because the things Americans were told could kill them only get stranger, louder, and more ridiculous. 1. Sitting too close to the TV would ruin your eyes. For decades, American parents treated the living room television like a glowing radioactive monster. Sit too close, and you would hear it immediately. Back up, you'll ruin your eyes. Every kid from the 70s, 80s, and 90s knew the warning. You could be watching cartoons peacefully, 3 feet from a wood-paneled Zenith TV, and suddenly your mother acted like you were staring into a nuclear reactor. The funny part is, the fear had a tiny historical spark. Some early color TVs in the 1960s did have radiation concerns, but modern TVs do not destroy your eyesight. Eye doctors say sitting close may cause temporary eye strain, not permanent damage. It can also be a sign that a kid already needs glasses. So the TV wasn't killing your vision, it was just exposing it. Basically, the television didn't ruin your eyes, it snitched on them. 2. Pop Rocks and soda would make your stomach explode. This was the playground horror story of the late 1970s. Eat Pop Rocks, drink soda, and boom! Your stomach becomes a 4th of July finale. The rumor got so famous that it dragged in Little Mikey, the kid from the Life cereal commercials. According to the legend, Mikey mixed Pop Rocks with Coca-Cola and died in a fizzy internal disaster. None of it was true. Pop Rocks are basically candy with tiny carbon dioxide bubbles trapped inside. Soda also has carbon dioxide. Together they can make foam, noise, and maybe one impressive burp. Not a medical explosion. The rumor became such a problem that General Foods reportedly ran ads, wrote to school principals, and sent the candy's inventor around to prove children were not walking soda fountains. Imagine being a scientist and your job is telling America, no, your child will not detonate from candy. That is not food safety. That is national babysitting. 3. Sleeping with a fan on could kill you. This one sounds like something your aunt would whisper during a heat wave. Don't sleep with the fan on. You might not wake up. The fear is best known from South Korea, where fan death became a famous urban legend. But versions of weird fan panic reached plenty of households elsewhere too. The idea was that a fan in a closed room could somehow steal oxygen, cause hypothermia, or quietly assassinate you while you slept. Very dramatic behavior from a $19 appliance from Walmart. In reality, a normal electric fan does not remove oxygen from a room. It moves air. That is its whole resume. Health experts do warn that fans are not always enough during extreme heat, especially in sealed rooms with dangerous temperatures, but the fan itself is not a silent bedroom murderer. It is not plotting. It has 3 speeds and dust on the cage. The real killer was never the fan. It was panic with a power cord. 4. Cracking your knuckles would give you arthritis. Every kid who liked popping their knuckles eventually heard the same dramatic prediction. Keep doing that, and you'll have arthritis before you're 30. Parents said it, grandparents swore by it, teachers chimed in. It sounded so certain that plenty of people stopped cracking their fingers out of fear they were slowly destroying their hands one satisfying pop at a time. The sound itself certainly doesn't help your case. It feels like something important is breaking. But that's not what's happening. The popping noise comes from tiny gas bubbles collapsing inside the fluid that lubricates your joints. It's more like opening a tiny soda can than snapping a bone. One of the best-known pieces of evidence came from California physician Dr. Donald Unger. For more than 50 years, he cracked the knuckles on only his left hand while leaving his right hand alone. At the end of the experiment, both hands looked virtually identical, with no difference in arthritis. His unusual dedication even earned him an Ig Nobel Prize. So, unless you're cracking your knuckles hard enough to challenge a concrete wall, the biggest danger isn't arthritis. It's the annoyed look from everyone sitting nearby. 5. Going outside. With wet hair would make you catch a cold. If you grew up in America, winter mornings usually included 2 things: a heavy coat and someone shouting, "Dry your hair before you leave." According to generations of worried parents, stepping outside with damp hair was practically an invitation for pneumonia. It didn't matter if you were running 5 feet to the car or walking the dog. Wet hair was supposedly asking for trouble. The belief makes sense on the surface. Cold weather and illness seem connected. because cold and flu season happens during the winter. But viruses don't care whether your hair is dry, curly, or soaking wet. Colds are caused by viruses, not chilly temperatures. Scientists believe winter illnesses spread more easily because people spend more time indoors, packed together in homes, schools, offices, and stores, where viruses pass from person to person. Dry indoor air may also make it easier for viruses to spread. Could you feel colder with wet hair? Absolutely. You might shiver, complain, and regret skipping the hairdryer. But discomfort isn't the same as catching a virus. The only thing wet hair really guarantees is that you'll spend the next 10 minutes hearing, "I told you so," from someone who still believes Mother Nature personally hands out colds. 6. Swallowing gum would stay in your stomach for 7 years. Every child accidentally swallowed a piece of chewing gum at least once. Almost immediately, panic set in. Somewhere nearby, an adult would calmly announce, "Don't worry, it'll just stay in your stomach for 7 years." Somehow, that sentence was supposed to make everyone feel better. The image was unforgettable. Kids imagined colorful layers of gum piling up inside them like geological rock formations. Bubble gum from 2nd grade sitting next to peppermint from Christmas, all patiently waiting for their 7-year eviction notice. Fortunately, that's not how the digestive system works. Gum isn't easily broken down because its base is designed to be chewy. But your body doesn't keep it as a souvenir. It simply moves through your digestive tract like other indigestible materials and usually leaves your body within a few days. Doctors only become concerned in rare cases where someone swallows large amounts of gum repeatedly, especially small children, because it could contribute to an intestinal blockage. So no, that stick of spearmint you swallowed at age 8 isn't still hanging around today. If anything has survived that long, it's the story your parents told you about it. 7. Eating before swimming would make you drown. Summer afternoons at the neighborhood pool followed a familiar routine. Lunch ended, kids grabbed towels, and just as everyone sprinted toward the water, an adult yelled, "Wait 30 minutes after eating." It didn't matter whether you'd eaten a full barbecue or half a peanut butter sandwich. Swimming too soon supposedly guaranteed painful cramps, and maybe even drowning. The warning became so common that countless children spent half their summer vacations staring at the pool while watching an imaginary countdown clock. The truth is much less dramatic. After eating, your body does send a little more blood to help digestion, but not enough to suddenly shut down your muscles. Research has found no evidence that healthy people are at significant risk of drowning simply because they swam after lunch. Could you feel uncomfortable after eating a giant meal and immediately diving into an intense swim? Sure. Just like running a marathon after Thanksgiving dinner isn't the greatest idea. But recreational swimming after a normal meal is generally considered safe. Looking back, the 30-minute rule may have had another purpose. It gave exhausted parents half an hour to digest their own burgers, drink some iced tea, and enjoy the rare sound of children sitting quietly for once. 8. Reading in dim light would permanently damage your eyes. Long before smartphones lit up our faces every night, parents had another concern. If you sat in bed reading with only a small bedside lamp, someone would eventually warn, "Turn on another light, you'll ruin your eyes." It sounded completely reasonable. After all, reading in dim light feels harder. Your eyes work more, the words seem fuzzier, and before long you're rubbing your face and yawning. Surely permanent damage couldn't be far behind. Fortunately, eye specialists say that's not how vision works. Reading in poor lighting can cause temporary eye strain, headaches, or tired eyes because your eye muscles have to focus harder. But once you rest, those symptoms usually disappear. There is no evidence that dim lighting permanently damages healthy eyes. The warning survived because people naturally connected discomfort with injury. If your eyes felt tired, something terrible must have happened. In reality, your eyes were simply asking for a break. Ironically, today's biggest challenge isn't reading paperback novels under a weak lamp. It's spending hours staring at glowing phones, tablets, and laptops without blinking enough. Grandma was worried about one tiny reading light. She never imagined we'd willingly carry one in our pockets all day. 9. If you swallowed watermelon seeds, a watermelon would grow inside you. Every American kid heard this one at least once during a summer picnic. You're eating watermelon as fast as possible because your cousins are racing you. And suddenly, someone shouts, "Don't swallow the seeds! A watermelon will grow in your stomach!" Instantly, lunch becomes a biology horror movie. Kids pictured vines crawling up their throats and giant melons bursting through their t-shirts before Labor Day. The idea probably survived because it was memorable, not because anyone truly believed it. Seeds grow in soil with sunlight, moisture, nutrients, and plenty of room. Your stomach offers none of those things. It's dark, full of powerful digestive acids and constantly breaking food down. That's a terrible place to start a garden. Most swallowed watermelon seeds simply pass through your digestive system without causing any problems. They're no more likely to sprout than a peanut or a grain of corn. Still, the warning had one unexpected benefit. It kept kids spitting seeds across the yard instead of swallowing them, which somehow turned every family barbecue into an unofficial seed-spitting championship. No watermelons ever grew inside anyone, but plenty of neighborhood rivalries certainly did. 10. Chocolate milk comes from brown cows. This isn't exactly a warning, but it became one of America's funniest misconceptions. If you grew up hearing jokes about brown cows producing chocolate milk, you probably laughed and assumed nobody actually believed it. Then surveys revealed that some adults honestly weren't sure where chocolate milk came from, and suddenly the joke wasn't quite as ridiculous. The myth probably survived because most people never think about how flavored milk is made. They buy it at the grocery store, pour it over cereal, and move on with life. Somewhere along the way, the idea of special chocolate-producing cows became part of American folklore. In reality, chocolate milk is simply regular cow's milk mixed with cocoa and sweeteners. The cows themselves have absolutely nothing to do with the flavor. A brown Jersey cow produces the same white milk as a black and white Holstein. It's one of those stories that refuses to disappear because it's too funny to retire. Somewhere, every dairy farmer has probably answered the question at least once with remarkable patience. The cows deserve credit for plenty of things. Inventing chocolate isn't one of them. 11. Going outside. Without a jacket would give you pneumonia. Winter in America often sounded like a survival documentary. Walk outside without your coat, and someone immediately predicted disaster. Put your jacket on, you'll catch pneumonia. It didn't matter whether you were running to the mailbox or scraping frost off the windshield. Apparently, 5 minutes of cold air could send you straight to the hospital. The truth is much less dramatic. Pneumonia is usually caused by bacteria, viruses, or fungi, not by forgetting your winter coat. Cold weather by itself doesn't create an infection. That said, winter does create conditions where illnesses spread more easily. People spend more time indoors together, viruses circulate more efficiently, and dry air can irritate your airways. So while winter and pneumonia are connected, your missing jacket isn't the villain. Of course, going outside underdressed can still make you miserable. You'll be cold, uncomfortable, and probably regret your decision within minutes. Parents understood that perfectly well. It's just easier to convince a stubborn teenager by predicting certain doom than by saying, "You're going to be uncomfortable for 10 minutes." 12. Crusts were the healthiest part of the bread. American parents have used every possible strategy to make children finish their sandwiches. One of the most creative claimed that all the vitamins were hiding inside the crust. According to this legend, refusing to eat the edges meant throwing away the healthiest part of the loaf. For generations, kids reluctantly chewed through dry crusts while wondering why nutrition always seemed to gather around the least exciting bite. The reality is surprisingly ordinary. Bread crust and the soft center are made from the same dough. During baking, the outside simply loses more moisture and browns because of the Maillard reaction, the same chemical process that gives toast, cookies, and roasted foods their rich flavor. Some studies suggest browned crust may contain slightly higher levels of certain antioxidants created during baking, but not enough to transform it into a nutritional superfood. The difference is relatively small. Parents probably weren't trying to teach food chemistry. They just didn't want half the sandwich ending up in the trash. Looking back, convincing children that nutrition lived exclusively on the edges was actually a pretty clever sales pitch. 13. Swimming. During a thunderstorm was only dangerous. Because of rain, most children accepted one simple rule at the community pool. If thunder rolled, everyone got out of the water. But plenty of kids secretly assumed lifeguards were overreacting. After all, rain itself isn't dangerous. Why should a few clouds ruin the afternoon? The real reason has nothing to do with getting wet. Water is an excellent conductor of electricity. If lightning strikes a lake, river, or swimming pool, The electrical current can spread through the water with deadly consequences. That's why pools are cleared at the first sound of thunder, even if the sky still looks mostly blue. Lightning can also strike several miles away from the center of a storm. In other words, if you can hear thunder, you're already close enough to be at risk. Unlike many childhood warnings, this one deserves to be taken seriously. It isn't an old wives' tale, it's basic physics. So yes, waiting 30 minutes after the last clap of thunder may feel frustrating. But unlike worrying about swallowed watermelon seeds, this is one family rule that's worth following every single time. 14. Sugar makes kids. Hyper birthday parties seem to prove it beyond any doubt. Children ate cake, drank bright blue punch, tore across the yard screaming, and parents nodded knowingly. Too much sugar. Case closed. The story became so accepted that it almost felt impossible to question. But researchers who actually studied children's behavior found something surprising. In carefully controlled experiments, sugar itself did not consistently make kids more hyperactive than placebo foods. So why did every birthday party look like absolute chaos? Context matters. Kids at parties are already excited. They're surrounded by friends, balloons, games, presents, loud music, and adults who are distracted. Add ice cream to the mix, and it's easy to blame the dessert instead of the celebration itself. Interestingly, studies have shown that parents who believe their children consumed sugar often rate them as more hyperactive, even when the kids were secretly given sugar-free foods. That doesn't mean children should eat unlimited candy. Too much sugar still isn't great for overall health. It just means the birthday cake probably isn't secretly flipping an invisible turbo mode switch inside every 8-year-old. 15. Cracking open the car window. During lightning was dangerous. Long road trips always came with advice from somebody in the family. One surprisingly common warning claimed you should keep every window tightly shut during a thunderstorm because lightning could somehow fly through a slightly open crack and strike the passengers. The advice mixed one true fact with one completely false conclusion. Cars are actually among the safest places to be during a lightning storm, but not because of the rubber tires, another popular myth. The real protection comes from the vehicle's metal frame. It acts like a Faraday cage, directing most of the electrical current around the outside of the car and into the ground instead of through the people inside. Keeping the windows closed is still sensible because heavy rain and strong winds can blow inside. But a window being cracked open a few inches isn't what determines whether lightning is dangerous. Ironically, the safest part of the storm isn't staying perfectly sealed inside the car. It's resisting the urge to step outside and touch anything metal until the thunder has completely passed. 16. Eating turkey would knock you out because it's full of tryptophan. Every Thanksgiving, someone eventually leans back from the dinner table, yawns dramatically, and declares, "It's the turkey. All that tryptophan makes you sleepy." It sounds scientific enough that nobody questions it. After all, turkey contains tryptophan, an amino acid the body uses to produce serotonin and melatonin. Mystery solved, right? Not exactly. Turkey does contain tryptophan, but so do chicken, beef, eggs, cheese, fish, and plenty of other everyday foods. In fact, turkey doesn't contain unusually high amounts compared to many other proteins. The real culprit behind that post-dinner nap is much less mysterious. Think about a traditional Thanksgiving meal. You've just eaten turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing, rolls, sweet potatoes pie, and probably enough gravy to qualify as a small lake. Your stomach is working overtime digesting a massive meal, while carbohydrates trigger insulin, which can make you feel more relaxed. In other words, the turkey gets blamed for a crime committed by the entire buffet. It's the culinary version of arresting one suspect while the rest of the gang quietly slips out the back door with your energy level. 17. Drinking coffee would permanently stunt your growth. For decades, countless American kids were warned to stay away from coffee unless they wanted to remain the shortest person in the family forever. Adults repeated it with complete confidence. One sip of dad's morning coffee supposedly meant saying goodbye to the NBA before elementary school was even over. The myth became so widespread that many people still believe it today. Oddly enough, no solid scientific evidence has ever shown that coffee prevents children from growing to their natural height. Researchers have studied caffeine for years, and while excessive caffeine isn't recommended for children because it can interfere with sleep, increase anxiety, or cause jitteriness, it doesn't stop bones from growing. Height is primarily determined by genetics, nutrition, hormones, and overall health. Some historians think the myth gained popularity decades ago when health campaigns wanted children to drink more milk instead of coffee. Since milk contains calcium and supports healthy bones, making coffee sound like the villain was an easy marketing strategy. So if you ended up 5'6", don't blame the occasional sip of your grandfather's coffee. Genetics had already written that chapter long before your first taste. 18. You should never wake a sleepwalker. Movies often portray sleepwalking like handling a ticking time bomb. If someone is wandering through the house asleep, the worst thing you could possibly do is wake them. According to the legend, they'd have a heart attack, lose their mind, or suffer some mysterious psychological disaster. That idea sounds dramatic, but doctors say it's largely a myth. Sleepwalking usually occurs during deep stages of sleep, and while waking someone may leave them confused or startled, it doesn't harm their brain. In fact, the bigger danger is letting them continue walking around the house where they could fall downstairs, leave the front door, or accidentally injure themselves. Experts generally recommend calmly guiding the person back toward bed if possible. If you do wake them, expect a few moments of confusion rather than a medical emergency. The myth probably survived because waking a sleepwalker can produce an awkward scene. Imagine opening your eyes in the hallway while holding a lamp and wearing yesterday's socks. That's certainly embarrassing, but embarrassment isn't life-threatening. Sometimes the scariest part of sleepwalking isn't being awakened. It's discovering the next morning that you apparently made yourself a peanut butter sandwich at 3 o'clock in the morning. 19. Gum stays in your body. Forever if you swallow too much. Most kids already knew about the famous 7-year gum story, but some families added an even darker sequel. Swallow enough gum over the years, they warned, and it would pile up inside your body forever like layers of old wallpaper until doctors eventually had to remove it. Fortunately, your digestive system isn't a storage closet. Chewing gum is made from ingredients your body doesn't fully digest, particularly the gum base. But that doesn't mean it stays behind. Just like certain plant fibers or seeds, it normally travels through your digestive tract and exits naturally within several days. Doctors do caution that swallowing large amounts of gum repeatedly, especially in young children, can rarely contribute to intestinal blockages, particularly if it's swallowed along with other indigestible objects. Those situations are unusual and involve far more than accidentally swallowing one stick during math class. It's amazing how one small piece of mint-flavored gum inspired decades of parental warnings. Looking back, the gum wasn't really the issue. Parents were probably more concerned about replacing the pack they had just bought yesterday. 20. You could catch poison ivy. Just by standing near it, as children, many Americans treated poison ivy like it had magical powers. Walk too close, and somehow the rash would leap through the air and attack your skin. Families hiking through the woods often acted as though the plant had developed a personal grudge against anyone wearing shorts. The truth is much more specific. Poison ivy causes its famous itchy rash because of an oily substance called urushiol found on the leaves, stems, and roots. To develop the rash, that oil usually has to come into direct contact with your skin or be transferred from clothing, shoes, pet fur, or gardening tools. Simply standing near the plant won't trigger a reaction. There is one important exception. If poison ivy burns in a wildfire or campfire, tiny particles containing urushiol can become airborne in the smoke. Breathing that smoke can be extremely dangerous and may cause severe reactions. So yes, poison ivy deserves respect, but not because it's secretly launching invisible attacks from 6 feet away. It's dangerous because its invisible oil is remarkably persistent and surprisingly easy to spread without realizing it. 21. Going swimming right. After getting a sunburn was dangerous. After a long afternoon at the beach, someone always noticed the bright red shoulders. Then came another warning. Don't get back in the water. That sunburn and cold water don't mix. Like many family rules, this one contains a tiny grain of truth wrapped in unnecessary drama. A sunburn is essentially damage to the skin caused by ultraviolet radiation. The affected skin becomes inflamed, sensitive, and sometimes swollen. Jumping into cool water won't make the burn worse. In fact, cool, not ice cold, water often feels soothing and can temporarily relieve discomfort. The real concern isn't the water itself. Severe sunburns can contribute to dehydration, dizziness, and heat-related illness, especially if you've been baking in the sun for hours. Spending even more time outdoors without shade, fluids, or sunscreen only adds to the problem. So swimming after a sunburn isn't the dangerous part. Staying in the blazing sun because one more hour won't hurt is where people often get into trouble. As usual, childhood warnings weren't completely wrong. They simply blamed the swimming pool instead of the giant burning ball of fire hanging in the sky. 22. Reading in a moving car would permanently damage your eyes. Family road trips used to come with two guarantees: someone asking, "Are we there yet?" and an adult warning that reading in the car would ruin your eyesight forever. If you pulled out a comic book or a paperback somewhere between Ohio and Indiana, chances were good you'd hear the lecture before you finished the first chapter. The idea wasn't completely random. Reading in a moving vehicle can be uncomfortable because your eyes constantly adjust as the scenery shifts while your brain tries to process motion. For some people, that mismatch can even trigger motion sickness, headaches, or eye fatigue. But none of that means permanent eye damage. Eye doctors explain that reading in the car may temporarily strain your eyes, especially on bumpy roads or in poor lighting, but it doesn't change your vision permanently. Once you rest your eyes, the discomfort usually disappears. Looking back, parents may have had another reason for discouraging books during long drives. A child staring out the window is much less likely to complain about feeling carsick every 20 minutes. Sometimes you'll ruin your eyes with simply the quickest route to a quieter back seat. 23. You should never eat before bed. Because your stomach stops working. Late-night snacks have always carried a little guilt. But many Americans grew up hearing something even scarier. If you ate right before going to bed, your stomach would basically shut down while you slept. According to the myth, food would just sit there all night, somehow rotting inside your body until morning. That's an impressive image, but it's not how digestion works. Your digestive system doesn't clock out when you fall asleep. Your stomach, intestines, liver, and other organs continue doing their jobs around the clock. Digestion may slow slightly during sleep because your overall metabolism changes, but it certainly doesn't stop. That said, eating a huge meal immediately before lying down can cause problems for some people. Acid reflux and heartburn are more likely because stomach acid can move upward into the esophagus when you're lying flat. That's uncomfortable, but it's very different from food rotting overnight. So your midnight peanut butter sandwich isn't starting a science experiment in your stomach. The bigger danger is discovering you've somehow eaten half the jar while standing in front of the refrigerator at 11:45 p.m. 24. Cracking an egg into hot coffee would cure a cold. Long before pharmacy aisles stretched for half a mile, many American families relied on homemade remedies passed down through generations. One unusual suggestion claimed that cracking a raw egg into hot coffee would help chase away a cold. Some people even added whiskey, sugar, or milk, creating a drink that looked more like a chemistry experiment than breakfast. The belief wasn't entirely unique. Variations of egg and coffee drinks appeared in several cultures, often as comforting winter beverages. The problem is that no scientific evidence shows this mixture cures viral infections. Colds are caused by viruses, and neither eggs nor coffee can eliminate them. Coffee may even make some people feel worse if it replaces fluids they need while recovering. That doesn't mean the drink is completely useless. A warm beverage can soothe a sore throat, and eggs provide protein and nutrients. But feeling temporarily comforted isn't the same as curing the illness itself. In the end, Grandma wasn't trying to become a medical researcher. She simply wanted you to feel cared for. The recipe may not have defeated the common cold, but it probably made people feel a little less miserable while waiting for their immune system to do the real work. 25. If lightning struck nearby, your telephone could kill you. Before smartphones lived in everyone's pocket, the family landline was the center of the house. During thunderstorms, many parents issued the same warning: hang up the phone. To kids, it sounded ridiculous. How could a conversation with grandma suddenly become dangerous? Surprisingly, this warning wasn't a myth at all, at least not in the days of traditional corded telephones. Lightning can travel through electrical wiring and telephone lines after striking nearby. If someone is using a corded phone during a storm, there's a small but real risk of electrical injury. That's why weather experts have long recommended avoiding corded phones until the storm passes. Modern cordless phones and cell phones don't carry that same risk because they aren't physically connected to outside telephone wires in the same way. So this is one case where parents actually deserved a rare victory lap. While plenty of childhood warnings fell apart under scientific scrutiny, this one had solid physics behind it. Sometimes Mom wasn't being dramatic. She was simply trying to keep everyone from accidentally turning a perfectly normal phone call into a very memorable weather event. 26. Cold weather would give you frostbite in minutes without gloves. Winter forecasts often sounded terrifying when you were a kid. Forget your gloves, and it seemed like your fingers might fall off before you reached the school bus. Parents painted a picture of instant frostbite the moment temperatures dropped below freezing. Reality is a little more complicated. Frostbite is a genuine medical emergency, but it depends on several factors, including air temperature, wind speed, moisture, and how long skin remains exposed. On a chilly day just below freezing, healthy skin usually doesn't develop frostbite within a few minutes. However, when temperatures plunge well below zero, especially with strong wind, exposed skin can freeze surprisingly quickly. That's why weather services often issue wind chill warnings during severe cold. The exaggerated version of the story probably helped parents win the daily battle over hats, scarves, and gloves. Convincing a stubborn 8-year-old to wear mittens is much easier when the alternative sounds like becoming an ice sculpture. So no, forgetting your gloves once probably wasn't going to cost you your fingers. But on truly bitter winter days, your parents' insistence wasn't just annoying, it was actually good advice. 27. Swallowing blood. During a nosebleed could poison you. Few childhood moments felt more dramatic than a nosebleed. One minute you were playing baseball or running through the backyard, and the next, everyone was scrambling for tissues. Somewhere in the middle of the chaos, another warning often appeared. Don't swallow the blood, it'll poison you. That sounds terrifying, especially when you're 8 years old. Fortunately, swallowed blood isn't poisonous. Blood is mostly made of water, proteins, and iron. If you accidentally swallow a small amount during a nosebleed, your stomach simply digests it like other organic material. The real reason doctors recommend spitting it out is much less dramatic. Larger amounts of swallowed blood can irritate the stomach and may cause nausea or vomiting. That's unpleasant, but it's not poisoning. Modern first aid advice is also different from what many people learned decades ago. Instead of tilting your head backward, experts recommend leaning slightly forward while gently pinching the soft part of your nose. That helps control the bleeding while reducing the amount of blood running into your throat. So, the blood wasn't secretly toxic. It was simply one more thing capable of making an already uncomfortable afternoon even less enjoyable. Turns out, growing up in America meant surviving almost as many myths as actual dangers. Which childhood warning fooled you the longest? Let me know in the comments.